actually waited for Anton, but you came instead. So you will be assigned to start our seminars. Let me introduce to you our distinguished guest, Dr. Professor Victor Taratukhin from the University of Münster. And as you've probably read in the ads, he will talk about the Stanford Design Method and its applications today. So please.
Hi guys, thanks for coming. You know, it's not easy to explain. Obviously, I have a different hat. I'm here from University of Münster, but I'm actually physically in Silicon Valley. I was a visiting professor at Stanford, I think from 2014, but now booked back to industry, so I'm now on SAP side, but we're doing the same things. We are working with academia, and then I'm still keeping my PhD students, two in Russia, one in Germany, so I think it's total 3 number. And then one in Heidelberg, I will tell you later what we are doing from the research side. But here I just want to give you some overview. And obviously you can stop me anytime you like, and you're very welcome to do so. To tell you about, let's say, my cultural experience. You know, we are in experience economy right now, and obviously coming from California to such hard engineering center, obviously from one side I'm expecting some, you're probably expecting some formulas there. It will definitely not the case, but obviously if you want that working with my PhD student and myself, we can go deep dive if you're interested on that. But let's try to give some overview, and for that, obviously, my question is, who knows design thinking? 1, 2, not too much. Yeah, excellent, thank you. So, because I think talking about Stanford Design Method, essentially we are talking about design thinking. And since I'm, by education, I think I'm engineer, first I'm an engineer, and I just want to give you some overview since we are talking about design. Design, not art design, but design of products, design of services for including engineering applications. So that's, you need to know my context. So my context, actually, I was born in Ulyanovsk, somewhere in the Volga River area. And then I moved to UK. I did my PhD in Ulyanovsk in CAD/CAM systems. So let's say I'm hard CAD/CAM guy, was in the beginning. Then I moved to UK, and my principal industry sponsor was AIRBUS Broughton team, and my research was about using multi-agent system for design consistency checking. So that was a beautiful era of concurrent engineering, multi-agent system. A lot of guys try to integrate AIRBUS services around Europe, to moving guys from Spain, Japan, UK, and France, and Germany working together. Well, it's happened. We have A380, and then you know that they stopped now. I think they're stopping to produce A380 soon, unfortunately. So then I moved to Cranfield University, when I was responsible for IT for product realization services. That's come that in my situation, I will tell you later on, we're talking about both sides, for education and research, because it's interrelated. And after Cranfield, I moved to SAP. I returned to Russia, and I was for 8 years responsible for running academic initiative here. So fortunately and unfortunately, I know most of our rectors, now presidents of universities. And I left to Münster in 2012 when we had like 52 universities as part of SAP University Alliance program. So we're talking about corporate information systems. We're talking now about machine learning, AI, blockchain. I will not cover this in details. Apart of that, talking about, and then from Münster I moved to Stanford, and it was amazing. I met Dim at that time, a friend of mine is here, and then I was very happy in Stanford. And then you need to be very careful about corporations. They remember that I'm also a sabbatical from SAP. So they catch me on the SAP campus and asking me to return back to SAP and help them to establish relations with Stanford, Berkeley. And we are also now developing South California area starting from UCLA and Irvine areas. So, but I said, everything is about connections. So this is the University of Münster European Research Center for Information System. It's hard about business processes. We are talking about business and IT integration. And I think I will cover this a few times. It's not only about engineering, it's engineering and business, IT and business. And I can see that a lot of things are happened, and then on my flight this morning, that's actually Silicon Valley, mostly San Francisco path. So why we're talking about Silicon Valley? 2 years ago, the situation was that we have startups in San Francisco, and here is the Silicon Valley, very expensive area and actually Stanford is somewhere there, yeah. And Berkeley is another world, it's another side of Harvard. And that's also about environment there. Forget about this because it's changed already. And you also need to forget about this one because talking to my guys in computer science department at Stanford, they said, you know, our students, they're coming, they're leaving, they're starting new startups, but it's always academia as a center when they always come back and get support from professors. They can get advice, they can get some sort of, even to find some investors for new ventures. So I think that the key about essentially Silicon Valley is it's a social connectivity. And if you could compare social connectivity in Boston and Palo Alto area, obviously I don't have a slide, but I think there was research a few years ago when they tried to, using sociology, to have a look specifically for social connectivity from network perspective. So they have networks, and yeah, I can tell you that obviously Silicon Valley is extremely heavily connected. People know each other, moving from one company to another, but that's a plus. But you also can see that what we have, and this is from 2013. I don't think we reached still there, but it is a really hungry things about breakthrough innovations. We're not yet there. I checked the last details, but it looks like that we will have a dramatic change. And you know, my taxi driver today was very surprised to see Yandex, you know, autonomous car here. And I told him that maybe next year there will be only autonomous. And he's not scared, but it's okay. He said that he will find another job. But talking about job, it's also about the way how we are utilizing books and knowledge which we had before. And coming from that, this is from my friend at Stanford, working in one of the founder of D-School, Design School. So why design thinking? And what is actually design thinking? Why it's happened? If you're in the business area, I'm talking to my students in Skoltech, I'm expedition leader for Skoltech, a lot of guys talking about innovations. They're talking about creativity, and I think this guy is David Kelly. David Kelly was actually a popularizer, somehow, design thinking term. He was I'm with Professor Larry Laffer, who is essentially design thinking founder from research side. And David Kelly was first. I know we have some PhD students there. Don't take this as a good example. He was the first failed PhD student of Larry Laffer. And he decided not to finish his PhD, but to go to start to business. He opened IDEO company, IDEO, and then he's now much richer and obviously much famous than Professor Larry Laffer, who is doing a lot of research by some reason. And he don't have a PhD, but he's a member of National Academy of Sciences, Engineering Sciences as well. So David Kelly is in the books, you can find a lot of things about practical design thinking. So what we have, from one side we have research guys who's working in design theory. They come from concurrent engineering, they come from mechanical engineering, from aerospace design. From other side we have a practical designers. With high schools or even without high schools, but they really know how to develop empathy, how to work with people. So, and that's a balance. And then sometimes you need both. You also can find a lot of books about innovations in the Valley. And I'm personally recommended you, if you're interested in design thinking topics, this is quite new, the Design Thinking Playbook. It's actually a Larry book. I think he's in like 3-4 months on market. It's a playbook, so you can use this for teaching or for research purposes. I would like to say that I like it very much, but because I think it's too hard, it's too many information there. But I think for the beginning, to take this as one of the understanding of design thinking culture, that should be fine. And also, as we can see, we have so much dramatical changes across different disciplines. And this is example for humanities. So we have a lot of IoT, big data, 3D printing, moving even to humanities area. I will not cover this, I just want to say that design thinking started as a joint design program between engineers and art guys. So with arts and engineering together. And I don't know, in Skoltech you don't have yet philosophers or sociologists, arts guys. They're in the future. Excellent, excellent. So I also like this book. Especially this, who knows this rainforest thing. And I think the difference, what that says actually very much about production side. It's a very traditional way of doing business and live there. It's, I think from US side, it's very much about East Coast somehow. Here is on the right side, it's really culture of Silicon Valley in few bullet points. So you can see that, well, I wouldn't say I will only take this thing about failure, because if you are engineer, you obviously know, and you know with NASA told that there's no thing that they even have some nice motto about that failure is not an option. Here in Silicon Valley, you are learning from your failures. And I think even NASA is doing the same thing. They're learning, they're keeping knowledge what's happened, and I will try to prove this right now. But starting to history, everything is started from this guy, John Arnold. And there was an era of space exploration. And obviously we are coming to this era again, hopefully, that we have John, he actually started as a professor at MIT. He was a professor there. And his challenge was to create case study Arcturus 4, which is essentially about MIT students going to another planet, and then essentially they need to be commivoyeurs, so they need to sell things there. And they have like full starship of great mixers, you know, like home appliances which they need to sell. And how it's happened, I will just switch it there, that they essentially found that from anthropology perspective, essentially they can't sell things there. So they need to redesign all things they have to make sure that aliens will buy it. So the way how Arnold tried to change the culture of MIT is to create what they say creativity engineering. So engineers need to be creative. And the way how he did it, obviously there was no computer at that time, it was a simulation on papers. So we have a lot of examples. So students need to review, they use the engineering drawings to understand how aliens looks like, so need to redesign things. And this is the nice example. It's not Yandex taxi, but that's the taxi probably for 2 aliens. So what's happened? Essentially, John Arnold was fired from MIT because MIT was not sure that time, and that was a Sputnik time, they really need creative engineers. They actually tried to have engineers as very much as a functional organization who knows what to do according to specifics and specifications. And John moved to Stanford, was employed by Stanford immediately, And then that's how era of design culture started in Silicon Valley. And you may not know, but you know that obviously Stanford Torus. But Stanford Torus was created as a joint effort of just summer school of students working in design faculty at Stanford. So we don't know. A lot of things can happen specifically because, and then now is Torus everywhere. I just was in the Institute of Biomedical Problems, and you can see some sort of, and I think that will be the next station. I hope that's how they dreaming. Also related that you have a Torus system in there. Again, please stop me anytime. Happy to answer any questions if you have. So talking about research side, because I'm research institution, I can spend a lot of time talking about this school, which is design school with David Kelly, which maybe it's more practical for Skoltech MBA and executive MBA students, because there are more guys on the side of management. Here is Larry Leffler. Larry, you know, he's there. He's actually running Center for Design Research. Globally, I would say I'm logically, since I did my PhD in UK, I belong to Engineering Design Center in Cambridge. It is a cultural difference between Cambridge Engineering Center and Center for Design Research of Larry. Larry was surfer when he joined Stanford. He was from Santa Barbara, and he actually was part of a lot of research which was in time when you have a culture of, you know, 1960s, and believe me, I never heard that Larry had any single engagement with any defense or military projects. He's really a guy from North California, enjoying very liberal way of living, and the culture is very open there, and research culture is extremely open. And at the moment what we have, and I belong as an industry affiliate to Larry team, we have 6 main groups looking for design side, but that's only within Larry Leffler team. That's the when design thinking starts. If you're going to Stanford, outside of Stanford, I will tell design thinking. If I will be in Stanford, I will tell Stanford Design Method. The simple answer is there's too many guys who are doing design thinking without fully understanding what it is. And even going to customers, I did my experience even working with, I think it was Japanese, German, Spanish, Portuguese, and also Russian customers. Even very advanced companies like Severstal or one of the airlines, they always said there's so many guys on the market who wants to tell us that one day design thinking course will be enough as soon as you will, you know, pay some consultancy fee. It's simply not the case, and I will try to tell you later why. So from that system, we also have 3 more professors. Shelley Shepard looking for, she's from MIT, long enough in Stanford. She's looking for design thinking for high schoolers and undergrads. Mark Kopowski is about biodesign. You know, you can, Mark is amazing. I think his biodesign group, bio-inspired design is one of the, I think it's #1 globally. And also we have a group working, and that's related to healthcare design research. It's related to surgical robots design. But in overall, I'm much more belongs to this group of design team behavior, when you need to understand how actually people are working on innovation areas by observing them. So that's the case when a lot of PhD students, we have a design observation studio, and we had regular experiments running to observe students working together. One of the key elements at the moment is a human-robot interaction. And a lot of grants now, it's about intelligent tables, it's about chairs, which can move, can understand your behavior, so you can I don't know how you imagine to have empty to this table, what is this chair. So the way how I understand when there's a things which... Oh, look, look, that's about empathy. So now Siri is you know, trying to ask me something, and I'm scared. So essentially, that was another area of research group. So one of things, who knows the concept of T-shaped people, T-shaped person? Well, it's interesting because something happened, and I was in the team of guys who actually invented these T-shaped teams and T-shaped behavior. And now you can see in Harvard Business Review and MIT Sloan, everyone is talking about this without telling who actually created this. But that's cool. I think that's good about research, that some ideas, they will be living without any guy who was creating this. So one of Ph.D. of Larry Leffer from Japan, he came in his Ph.D. with a concept that if you want to have a really creative team, you need to have enough T-shaped people there, T-shaped person, which is, in fact, this is an in-depth, and this is your soft skills, the way how you interact with people. And that's the, one of the example research was going on, trying to understand behavior. Traditional design thinking, it's about 4 stages: explore, discover, design, prototype, and deliver. If you could go to companies, Segastar, they have their own version. IBM, they have their own version. Oracle, somehow they have a version for Oracle. But it's very much deep with SAP at the moment. I will not mention SAP anymore. A part of design school at Stanford was created by founder of SAP, Hasse Plattner. He invested 32 million as a donation to establish this school. And that's happened exactly why, not because he was like, would like to help Stanford. It was a really big issue. When I joined SAP in 2004, it was hard engineering company. All guys from Germany, they're sitting in the specific rooms with specific table, and you need, you know, it's all the German requirements, how many people can sit and what, lights and so on need to be there. I was only coding. So Hasse observed this, and he found essentially there need to be some creative culture within the company to create new services, to create new user experience, to essentially to change interface, which was critically basic at that time. And then why he invested to Stanford, and also he invested in Hasse Plattner Institute in Potsdam, which the 2 institutions are working together as one discipline. So for SAP, it's also different. SAP, since they're working with more prototyping for software, you can see it's almost the same, but methods can be different. This is the example of ideation, scenes, and that's, you can get it free for web page. A lot of companies now using scenes without knowing that it was created in Uphouse in SAP. Again, don't want to go very much about design thinking in general, but obviously you need people, you need to be ready to work as a team, you need to have a specific room. A room is, it's about creative space. It's about that all things, you can move stuff here, but I don't see any sofas here. It's obviously nice to have a sofas because when students working for projects, they need to live there. They're actually sleeping there especially because if you have a deadline from industry. Methods in there, and essentially, again, it's quite trivial. I don't really want to go in very much in details, but when you are talking to, let's say, business guys, they need to follow some sort of instructions. So that's fail early and often, be visual, only one task at a time, stay focused, do not judge, root and ideas from others. That's interesting. When I come to Stanford, and I was surprised to learn that Larry said stealing is good. It's not about stealing, it's about sharing. So if someone can take idea, and this idea can be implemented, why not to do so? So it's interesting, it's about culture of working together and to work as a team. So this is a team rules, only one speaks at a time, stay focused, be visual, no criticism. That's really helpful, especially with the brainstorming process. And this is examples of some of design thinking rooms. This is the Larry, it's Stanford Law in there. You can use all star things. This is the Larry room. This is actually interesting because that's actually in Plekhanov Academy in Russia. As you can see, they have like nice moving things. They have a founder a picture there. The reason is to have a founder because this is from Stanford Law. This is the history of projects. And when I was in AIRBUS, working with AIRBUS project, the main question was, when you're designing CAD/CAM systems, how you really keep track about knowledge of previous project, historical knowledge. And that's the way how you can need to keep your prototypes trying to understand what was the failure before. And the failure was actually the case of famous paper bake competition. Paper bake competition is that everything is actually from paper. So students need to make some sort of prototype or vehicle, and they don't know what will be this grass, or there will be water there, and there will be competition. It's really nice team building exercise for students. Talking about students, design thinking project at Stanford is for 9 months. It will start in October and it will finish in June. It's a master's project, master's seminars. A lot of students then join the companies as a product engineers, and they also will be going to Ph.D. track. So it's a lot of fun. And that's also about that we have a lot of companies supporting research at Stanford. We'll try to move faster, moving to more interesting things. So that's examples of prototypes. As you can see, it is really key that your design thinking challenge will come from real company. Lufthansa, Volvo, SAP, and so on and so on. Every year, we have about 7, 8 projects running for companies, and companies will pay for all travel and expenses as well as $20,000 US for prototyping. So kids can spend 20K easily for making prototype. I'm running a course which is very much about enrichment. It's ME310I. So regional is ME310 and I is for industry. So we are trying to move students around to give them opportunity to explore new areas. This is from NASA, Yuri Griko. He is director laboratory for countermeasurement, and he was actually very nice talk about hibernation. You probably know Sergei Kravchenko, Boeing president, and he was talked very much about composite materials and about future of Boeing in Russia. So that sort of enrichments we are doing regularly for students at Stanford. We're also working with United Nations, and that's specifically to UNOSA. Since you're in, some of you is from Space Cluster, you probably know UNOSA. UNOSA is actually a very nice organization. They don't have a lot of money, obviously, because they are a UN system, but we help them a little bit. So this is the example of Portal. Portal is UN's pilot portal. And students use design thinking technique, trying to understand why General Assembly spent so many budget of countries, donors for this portal, and not so many people actually visiting this portal. Even there's a lot of information about disasters and about earthquakes and so on and so on. So we spent about 4 months specifically working with United Nations people, with the local government in Africa, Asia, try to create an empathy, because design thinking, it's about human-centered and it's about empathy. So trying to understand why no one want to use this and how to change the system. It was very good results, and now the UN Spider will be redesigned based on Stanford Advance. Just to give you another extreme case study related to space exploration. That's about satellites for Lockheed Martin. And the current architecture of like this, and you see this is the big, I think, satellites for geostationary orbit. And the guy who needs to change things or to design things, well, not design, I think it's about actually to construct this, to assemble this, and this guy is there. So when students try to redesign architecture for Lockheed Martin, engineers said, "You're crazy. We started to do it in the 1960s. We know exactly how best architecture looks like. You will not be able to help us at all." And it took a few months for students. First of all, they created persona. Persona is a very important part of design thinking. You need to better understand your customer. So that's actually meet Kevin, and Kevin is here. So they spent a lot of time really interviewing Lockheed Martin workers, trying to better understand what is the main issues, how they need to be correctly assembled satellites, so that's they come with this architecture. And Lockheed said, "Fine, thank you very much. Yes, we are happy, but nothing happened." And then we learned that a few years later, Lockheed introduced the same type of architecture. And this is some expectations about savings from deploying these new architectures. So that's also all coming to the question that even you have an extremely great prototype, and design thinking is also about prototyping. So how your prototype will be accepted by industry, by government, by company, by ventures. And I don't have an answer. A part of it's very personal. It's about the quality of prototype. I will tell you later about this. But when you're doing this very detailed prototype, you need to spend more time for that. And that's why we are using in design thinking paper prototype. We are using Raspberry, Arduino, just simply to make fast prototype to show the effect of this. So that's a really dilemma. So, and it's obviously art to work with industry guys. They have a very specific understanding of life, but somehow we're managing this. Sometimes we need to come with the challenges, which, as you can see, we are now obviously moving to Moon again, about to create villages. And I'm part of Moon Village Association, trying to understand how you can create a Moon Village. And I think there's a two concept to do it like exactly like on Earth, that every country will have their own chamber, and then they will be reconnected, but there's a legal issues, law, we really don't know how to do that. And that's why it's maybe sometimes we have analogy. And this is example of region village concept coming from Stanford, and this is about villages which will be fully autonomous. So they will have their own solar energy, they have extended summer. It's actually the first will be built in Netherlands and then in Sweden and Norway. So, and it's actually fully autonomous system. When you have houses, food, agriculture, everything is interconnected. So sometimes you can find some analogy which you can use for space application even on Earth. But sometimes it's not the fact that it's happened. So I'm now talking to Moon Village guys, to Moon Association, try to bring this example as part of the concept of future Moon Village. But also, a part of using standard design thinking techniques, you also can adapt design thinking for specific challenge. What it means? When you are using design thinking for engineering, it's about prototyping. We had like 5 different types of prototype before you will understand the product. When you're talking to marketing guy or going to school for marketing or management school, ideation stage will be very extended and prototyping will be quite less. So it's, again, my impression that talking about design thinking, when you go into this area, try to create your creative techniques in your research lab or in your organization. You obviously will adapt those ideas to your specific cases. In our case, we use standard design thinking for different. By the way, is there any NASA Space Act challenge here in Skoltech? Yeah?
I did participate 2 years ago.
Here in Skoltech?
No, it was in Red October that year.
Okay, in Moscow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I was responsible to run this for almost 3 years until I think they changed some time for October, and springtime was much better for
I did
everyone.
participate in May of 2017.
Exactly. So 18 was October, I was there because the budget changed in NASA and so on and so on. But we had quite intensive network in Silicon Valley, and we have kids from Ukraine, from Russia, from different in Germany, and we had using design thinking challenge for do that, and that's for 17. Yeah, and was actually main station Silicon Valley. What we're also doing, we try to implement design thinking closer to IoT. So for the last, I think from 2016, I ran some sort of technology design thinking challenge when we used Raspberry, mostly Raspberry, Java, and also in-memory database, HANA, and cloud, try to create some challenges for space application. This is 2016, and yeah, one person from that team will be, Nastya will be part of isolation experiment will start in March together with Institute of Biomedical Programs. This is the 2017 Design Thinking Challenge in the Black Sea area. And yeah, it was a lot of cool for students. But what we have so far, as you know, we are, again, it's interesting. I don't know, talking to NASA guys, I was very surprised to learn they have amazingly great designers. They can create such great PowerPoints. It's amazing. Because it was exactly the same about Mars exploration a few years ago. Now the shift focus to Moon again, and design is excellent. And obviously, they're changing concept quite regularly. I don't know what is the new name of this. When my PhD said that was participated was Deep Space Gateway. I think they renamed this again. Yeah. So, so what we are doing also, it's simply from other side. It's not about to design things for space exploration, but how to help space exploration. And obviously, you know this case with Apollo 13. It was actually a failure. But it was a very interesting failure because who actually enjoyed the movie Apollo 13? So you know the story about this. So they actually created modified, I think CO2 level was very high, so they created catalyst in fact to reduce number of CO2. And how they did, there was a prototyping team on Earth who helped them to use things within cabin to create this stuff. But what happened if we will go to Mars or we can go to another mission? It's about creativity of astronauts and cosmonauts, how creative they are. And that's why it's also related that they had extremely high level of stress level. So this is the examples of different environments. And Karpathin, that's one of the astronauts who was in space, and he actually was on the in SEALAB. And this is the very famous book. It's about SEALAB. It's about underwater psychological experiment. But also we can see, this is a recent from Russian media in Antarctic. So the stress level in isolation is very high. So you obviously need to have a look at doing enough research and train your astronauts to be ready for such sort of challenges. That's why this project has come for, and that's my project specifically in the area. It's big international project sponsored by NASA, and as you can see, we have this isolation chamber, and on March 19, there will be press conference, an official start of 4 months isolation. I believe crew of 5 people, 5, 6 people. It depends because they don't decide who is going and how many people. No, they decided how many, but they don't know who will be the first team and who will be the second team. But they will spend 4 months there. And they will be flying to moon, well, virtually. It's about simulation mission. They will be going to Gateway, spend time there, run rover on moon surface, and then come back to the Earth. We have Russians and Americans working together. So the question is, obviously there's a lot of things. There were a lot of things they need to consider related to medical things, psychology, but we're doing very small things. Our project is essentially about to understand stress factors and language cognition and teams' creativity under stress. For first one, we're using psycholinguistics. And obviously, it will be about observation, it's about interviewing, it will be psychological testing, and it's really about very high level of physical pressure as a stress factor. Danger fearing, sense of deprivation, monotony. So, and also cultural issues is there. Do you know how, it was quite intensive preparation for famous Apollo-Soyuz project. And in 1990s, when the Russians and Americans started flying together, there was a lot of cultural issues in communications. It was a very hard time. So essentially what they decided that, I think, few months, Russian cosmonauts with families will spend in Houston, and then American astronauts with families will spend time in Russia. Then they work as a team here before mission, trying to understand culture. So it's a lot of issues need to be considered. So, and that will be part of the research. Tomorrow I will run design thinking seminar for crew. We have hero of Russia astronaut Taratukhin, who will be the main guy there. He will be in isolation in the team 1, and the rest will be young physicists, psychologists, and also engineers. We have 2 engineers from NASA, and we have 1 engineer from Energia, and the rest is girls, doctors, actually. So I'm looking forward for that. And also 1 journalist, she graduated from Moscow Lomonosov University as a journalist. We need journalists there, anyway. Somebody should write about it. So I look forward for that. Again, if you have any question regarding stress factors, I can talk for hours. I will not do that. If you have a question, just ask me. And one more thing I want to show you, it's about that in design thinking, we're also looking for IoT elements in there. And this is research run by, that's my Ph.D. student, Julia, when she was in Georgia Tech, and now she's in Potsdam in SAP Innovation Center Network. Design of IoT architectures can be really challenging. We have so many smart applications, and then she look on that very much in details, try to understand designer and engineers from design thinking perspective. So she created some sort of structure, trying to understand how we can implement IoT software in the best way. And again, I have full structure. If you have a question how to design IoT with design thinking, again, I can connect you with Julia. She will be able to. And more importantly, I think this is one of my last slides. So as you can see, that's what I found in Delta. I heard rumors, especially from Skoltech Management School, that founders of Skoltech, they actually brought the first ideas just on this, maybe not on the Delta, but using this napkin. And I believe that the way how you are creating things and the way how you're working with your innovations is very much depends on you. And that's how we can design world well, and now we need to design also moon. So it's very shortly and about design thinking, and if you have any questions, happy to answer. Thank you.
Questions, anyone?
SAP, and I saw in Skoltech we have a team center of a Siemens. So what is the main difference between why we should a SAP and why we not other softwares for designing processes?
We're talking about, well, I think we have a lot of IT vendors, and all of them, they have some sort of version of how they designing software. We're talking about, Lean, we're talking about design thinking, we're talking about different version. In Japan companies, they're using intensively the Japanese internal principles to design software and hardware together. So I don't think it's big difference now in terms of the way how companies designing software. It's simply that SAP was the first who tried to implement design thinking in the entire structure of company. Development, marketing, sales, and all different guys, they were trained in design thinking only in 1 year. So companies spent a lot of money on that. IBM was the next one, but IBM concept was different because IBM started to buy designer companies. And I think now, if you see the portfolio of IBM, they are the largest design thinking company in the world, simply because they are selling design thinking services to the customers. So if you're coming to IBM, for instance, and will ask for support of some sort of innovation things and so on, obviously you will be able to buy services from them, while SAP is offering this for free for customers. So it's a different pricing model and structure. We believe that we better support our challenges of our customers, then we will sell these additional services. But that's a different strategy. So. Any more questions from consulting companies?
How do you think how consulting companies can help in space exploration development, or how they can input value or something like that? Can they take part in that kind of projects in general?
Well, that's a question. Maybe Christina is my former student, and you're now in Deloitte. Yeah?
Yes, work for technology integration group.
So what I can see from consultancy companies, by the way, I didn't mention that. Every consultancy company in Deloitte, they have their own design thinking culture. You have your own version. Accenture, Deloitte. So they claim that they have the best one. I believe, I never heard about any efforts of big four companies to support space exploration somehow. I never heard about it there. But I'm sure, as soon as we will have a moon village, that business consultancy will immediately open offices there to support people there. Because that's the way how consultancy works.
Maybe for financial services.
For financial, yeah.
Not technology.
Managing local moon currency, I suppose.
Actually, I can comment on this. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'll take your window
Please.
a little bit. This is an interesting question. Where you can help is services, because the biggest thing in the space exploration now is services, and the services that the space sector can provide in the space infrastructure. And if you look at any space company, they cannot think in terms of finances and money. They think in terms of technology. Let's launch a satellite, let's build this, let's build that. But we have seen so many cases where companies would have great ideas, but they don't know how to make money with them. So what you need to do is you take your clients and say, why don't you invest into this company and they will provide you that service, and then you will be able to make money. And then the investors will come and say, guys, can you give us this technology, we will sell services.
Like a glue between money and applause.
Whatever.
Yes,
Well,
I got it.
There is a Russian word proslойка, but yes.
I shouldn't like having glue next to my money then.
students.
the university also like help?
It's
get
always
in this
open,
industry?
open right. There's no IP issues or
Okay.
people, because it's essentially we have two parts, and this is a very strong boundary in Stanford. One is education, and then research. But essentially, if it's industry-sponsored research, there are IP involved. But everything which students, by students, for students, it's open. It's open. IP is a Stanford motto. So you can get all information you need. You just need to ask Stanford, they will provide. But obviously, if you spend 9 months working for prototype, you have a better chance, obviously, to create your startup company with your ideas simply because you have a lot of things in your mind, and you have a right to do that because it's open IP, than someone who will read 200 pages description of yours. So that's why a lot of students after this school, they will open companies and startups.
But does Stanford have funding for those projects, or do students have to go to investors?
No, because they're all industry contributions going as gifts.
Okay.
So there's gifts of, going to, from companies, it's 150K per project, 75K going to Stanford, 75 going to international university. And that's, I didn't mention this, it's not about Stanford. It must be partner institution abroad. The reason is, that's what I specifically mentioned. It's about cultural understanding as a culture. And it's amazing to see, sorry, I will just mention that when we have guys from Stanford and Germany working together as one team for 9 months. And Germans, everything is about planning. And Americans about doing. That was a clash, cultural clash. But that's really helpful to understand both cultures. And when we have a Japanese there, it's even interesting. Do you know what they try to reach Japanese students? In one way? Harmony. Heavy to understand by Americans. Yeah? Yeah, so it's open IP. Open IP.
Question, please. Doubt for me is between the design science and design thinking and the technological thinking. Because if I want to design something, I should know the details about that system. Okay, and someone who knows the details about that system doesn't know the design thinking. How we can connect these two persons together? Can you tell more about this interface? We have one design thinker and we have someone who knows a lot about space technology. How we can connect to, how we can make the literature between these two persons?
That's a really good question. That's always the case for every project. It's unique case. Sometimes we have more engineers, and then they stuck with somehow how they can proceed with the technology. But you need to take in mind that it's a human-centered approach. You need to make a lot of things to make sure to understand your customer, your person, who will be using your services or product. So that's the key. But I can tell you that's a good question. And that's always when I discuss with German colleagues, they say, how we can prove that this prototype is good for company if there's no detail enough. So normally what we have, I'm talking about mechanical engineering school. So we have 6 prototypes, which will be very rough developed. And then from 6 prototypes, there will be one selected, and we'll go to more detailed prototype. Then we need technology engineers, we need guys who understand smart systems. Then we can bring them from computer science department or from the teams. But it's always nice about diversity within teams. What's happened, also from my understanding, it's traditionally that if we have a Germans like TU Munich or Aachen, or we have Hasselplattner Institute, they are really good in computer science. They are doing a lot of coding. While the US team is more about ideas, creativity, and so on. And that's the good result by it. But again, it's case by case. That's why a lot of these prototypes, even they are good one, but they're not proved by industry. And all project we divided on 2 types. One is thank you, and the second is wow. And everyone wants to be wow. But it's the case that we have also thank you projects. Take place.
As design thinking is moving, like we are shifting from Earth to Moon village, as you mentioned, and it's going more into space right now, the growing field. So you mentioned there are some cultural differences at one point of time while thinking and designing some engineering tools. So if we go on for a technology or a equipment or prototype that for a moon village, for example. So there will be two aspects, one cultural or a way of thinking of people, another will be technically viable aspect. So how do we connect these two? Is there any legal framework or is handbooks which we should abide by, or which part we should give importance, the technological like viability or the cultural aspect?
Are you talking in general or only about moon village?
Maybe for the moon village.
On moon village, there's no any standards. There's no law. I think the first session of Moon Village Association was last summer in Vienna at Unispace Plus 50. That's a lot of opportunities to learn standards and things and so on regarding how we can link technology and the ability. I think that's the question of we try to avoid go deep in technology. So I think maybe artificially, but when you're doing design, you need to put technology a little bit behind. So we are putting person, human in center. Then we can find new technologies needed. I know it's ideal, and as engineers, sometimes I believe that it's also need to be technology effort to support that. But somehow, Stanford is mostly about creating ideas, and then technology will follow somehow. But it's not exactly all the case. Especially medical school, they spend so much time on developing new methods, approaches, and procedures. Then startups will start from this very developed techniques, for instance.
Existing this presentation, I think you explain us about the benefits of design thinking and showed us some examples and what we should consider. But how it works? Can you explain how, for example, in the slide for the moon station, can you bring it? In the slide.
This one?
Yes, it was. Can you said that you did some design on this, yes?
Though it's an analogy to the region village of the.
So, not about the moon.
This one, yeah.
Okay. Can
That's
you tell
all for
us
the.
how did you do that? What you considered in this? What you didn't consider? What procedure you did? You just mentioned that we did it. It's an example, and you didn't tell anything about the methodology. How
You mean methodology, how to develop autonomous villages?
Yes, how you design something for moon by just.
This is example how you can use analogy, how you can use historical data if you have, and to use this historical data to develop things on the moon. And they always like have a two, we can copy this or we can adapt this. And this also about social issues, law, and how we can develop moon village, how it looks like. And different countries, they have different autonomous systems. We have like one society with moon citizenship. We don't know. But we have, and that's, I'm not mentioning this here. And the case of Apollo 13, it's specific case when you can use historical data from these creativity elements. And you can use this maybe for further to learn how astronauts can be supported in the further trainings. So it's, again, forget about methodology, technology, they're all important, and techniques. But you are the most important person. If you are creative enough, if you know, if you are a T-shaped person, and you are deep enough, you have soft skills, then you will survive any environment on the moon. Any more questions?
Yeah, did you actually work with NASA? May, for instance?
Yeah, Sirius project is sponsored by NASA. Yep.
The reason I'm asking is because NASA has a very strong tradition of systems engineering. And what you're describing is very much like start with prototype, detail, application. I was wondering whether you had a chance to compare what you do in Stanford with the, let's say, classics or systems engineering and what you can, something can be changed.
Most of guys, I think, Larry Lightfoot spent 6 years in NASA. So there were guys from NASA, or Scott Hubbard, who's his former director of Ames, and he's now adjunct professor at AIRBUS. I met Scott a number of times. He always complained, or not complained, he did research how we can change, how we need to change culture of NASA to be able to go to Mars or any other planets.
That's a question of money, not culture.
Not so sure. Money is good, but sometimes money is not enough.
Unfortunately, here it's very simple because to go to Mars, you have to build a big rocket. You have to shield yourself from the radiation, which means mass. And mass to Mars is million a kilogram. That's basically simple physics. And because nobody wants to build today whether 50 billion actual cost is one person to Mars. Same thing. So if you change your culture, you can do it nicely without an overrun, which is usually happens. But it's just that there's not enough political will to send something to Mars. Well, and the moon for that matter.
Well, to be honest, I'm not so sure about moon yet, to be honest. And that's not coming to increase budget of NASA significantly. And I would agree with you. We need budget. We need budget. But without human understanding, without changing culture within NASA or Roscosmos or other agencies, I don't think we'll be.
I think this is something that would be super interesting to look at because NASA has this very strong tradition and a bunch of engineers, but essentially it's the same thing. You start with prototypes and you go slowly to refine everything, and in principle it's very similar. And I wonder if, how different these approaches are because we're all, surfer, Southern California, few kind of guys. NASA engineers are with MIT, white ties kind of guys. So it's interesting to see how that, if you've ever had a chance to look at this.
Well, yes, we had like 3 delegations of NASA from East Coast coming to learn how to use design thinking. Within NASA, they have design thinking team, mostly for product design. You're right. They try to integrate this to the current engineering cycle. Talking about
What did they try to introduce?
to traditional engineering cycle. They have concurrent engineering. It's old term. It's maybe AIRBUS still using this, but I did my concurrent engineering research in 2002. So people try to avoid some terms, but it's a reality. So that's obviously if you have a teams working and designing things, then you can move to concurrent from CAD systems perspective. But telling that, as I mentioned in the beginning, I don't see any interest from Roscosmos.
Oh, no. This guy.
Japanese, yes. NASA is trying to do something. The Germans are quiet, but ESA is always there, will be looking for what NASA and other guys doing, and then they will follow. That's my understanding. It's a corporate culture.
Actually, Sukhoi jets is interesting. Not Sukhoi jets.
Well, I can tell you that after Stanford visited Sebastine, they opened huge design thinking center in Czech. And then also transportation companies, airline. So there are interests around different customer industries to come with new ideas, new innovation things. But regarding space exploration, yeah, it's a hard. Guys, thank you very much. Any